I lie on the cold hospital gurney watching the clock tick past 2 p.m., and my parents still haven't arrived for my heart surgery consultation. The same heart surgery that could determine whether I live to see my 22nd birthday. But I already know they're not coming because I can see my stepmother, Chen Mei Ling's social media post from the dentist office where she's accompanying her precious daughter, Li Wei Wei, for a routine teeth cleaning. The same routine appointment that has somehow become more important than my literal life or death medical consultation. The irony isn't lost on me that while I'm lying here with monitors attached to my chest, measuring the irregular rhythms of my failing heart, my father, Lin Jianming, is probably holding Wei Wei's hand in some luxury dental clinic, stroking her hair and telling her how brave she is for getting her teeth cleaned. The same man who told me just last week that I was being dramatic about my heart condition and that young people shouldn't worry so much about every little health issue when I begged him to come with me to discuss surgical options with Dr. Wang. But this isn't the first time they've chosen her over me. And as I stare at the white ceiling tiles and listen to the steady beep of machines keeping track of my deteriorating condition, I can't help but remember all the other times Chen Meiling manufactured some crisis or important event for Wei Wei that coincidentally occurred exactly when I needed my family the most, starting from the day she moved into our home 3 years after my mother's death and systematically began erasing me from my father's priorities. The pattern started small, almost believable, like when she convinced father that Wei Wei needed him to attend her high school orientation on the same day as my graduation ceremony because the poor girl has never had a father figure at such important moments. And I told myself it was okay, that I was being selfish for wanting my father's attention when Wei Wei had grown up without a dad, that I should be more understanding and mature about sharing the parent I'd had all to myself for 3 grief-stricken years after mother died. Then it escalated to more serious conflicts, like when I had my first heart episode at 19 and was rushed to the hospital, but father couldn't come because Wei Wei was having her college interviews that day and someone needs to drive her and provide moral support. And I spent 3 days in the cardiac unit with only my neighbor, Xu Ming Hao, visiting me, bringing homework and quietly sitting by my bed reading, while I pretended not to notice how his jaw clenched every time I made excuses for father's absence. But the worst was last year on the anniversary of mother's death. The day I always visited her grave and needed father's presence more than any other day of the year, when Chen Mei Ling suddenly decided that Wei Wei's 20th birthday party couldn't be postponed, even though it was originally scheduled for the following weekend because all her friends are available today and you know how hard it is to coordinate these social events. And father actually looked me in the eye and told me that mother would understand if we visited her grave the next day instead. That was the moment I realized I had become a ghost in my own home, a secondary character in my own life story, invisible, except when my medical bills needed paying, or when Chen Mei Ling needed someone to blame for being selfish and attention-seeking, whenever I dared to mention my declining health or ask for any support from the family that was supposed to love me unconditionally. Now I'm 21 years old and dying alone in this hospital room, and through my phone screen I can see Chen Mei Ling posting photos of Wei Wei laughing in the dental chair with father standing beside her looking proud and attentive. The same expression he used to have when he looked at me before his new wife convinced him that I was too independent and didn't need as much care as her delicate daughter who required constant attention and validation. The cardiologist Dr. Wang enters my room looking grim and professional, carrying the test results that will determine whether I'm a candidate for the experimental surgery that could save my life. And when he asks where my family is, I give him the same practice smile I've been perfecting for 3 years and say they had an emergency. Because even now, even when I'm potentially dying, I can't bring myself to admit that my stepmother's daughter's dental cleaning was more important than my survival. Miss Lin, Dr. Wang says gently, settling into the chair beside my bed, with the compassion of someone who has delivered countless pieces of life-altering news. Your test results show that your condition has deteriorated significantly since your last visit, and without immediate surgical intervention, I'm afraid you have perhaps 6 months left. The words hit me like ice water, but what's worse is the immediate thought that crosses my mind. I wonder if father will come to my funeral, or if Chen Mei Ling will schedule some important event for Wei Wei that same day that he simply can't miss. The surgery is risky, Dr. Wang continues, but it's your only chance for survival, and we need to schedule it within the next 2 weeks to have the best possible outcome, which means we'll need your family's consent and support for the recovery period. I almost laugh at the bitter irony because the same family whose consent I apparently need for surgery has spent the last 3 years proving that my health, my happiness, and my very existence ranks somewhere below their precious Weiwei's routine dental maintenance on their list of priorities. But as I'm signing preliminary surgical consent forms with shaking hands, my phone buzzes with a text from father. Sorry I missed your appointment, sweetheart. Weiwei had a dental emergency and we rushed her to the clinic. How did everything go? Hope it wasn't anything serious. A dental emergency, he calls it, when I can literally see Chen Mei Ling's social media posts showing Weiwei smiling and laughing through what was clearly a routine cleaning, and I realize with crystal clarity that this woman has been manufacturing these conflicts for 3 years, systematically ensuring that every important moment in my life is overshadowed by some crisis or event involving her daughter. That's when I remember the locked drawer in Mother's desk, the one Chen Mei Ling asked about repeatedly during her first months in our house, always with that sweet, concerned smile that never quite reached her eyes, claiming she just wanted to help organize Mother's belongings. And I suddenly understand why stepmother has been so desperate to gain access to Mother's private papers. The next morning, I discharge myself from the hospital against medical advice and go home to our family mansion, the same house where Mother raised me for 18 years before cancer took her away. The house that Chen Mei Ling has systematically redecorated to erase every trace of the original Mrs. Lin while installing her daughter as the new princess of the household. I find Chen Mei Ling in Mother's former sitting room, the one she's converted into her own personal office, and she looks up from her laptop with that practiced expression of mild concern she always wears when she's about to manipulate someone. Yu Xin, darling, your father said you had a medical appointment yesterday, she says in that sickeningly sweet voice she uses when other people might be listening. I hope everything went well, though I have to say you've been looking so healthy lately that I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. The dismissive tone is exactly what I expected, the same tone she's used every time I've mentioned my heart condition, always followed by some comment about how young people today are too anxious about their health or how I should focus on positive thinking instead of dwelling on medical issues. Where's father? I ask, ignoring her question about my appointment, because I've learned that sharing medical information with Chen Mei Ling is like giving ammunition to an enemy. He's driving Wei to her university. A poor girl was so stressed about her dental procedure yesterday that she couldn't sleep. And you know how important her education is. Stepmother replies with that martyr expression she wears whenever she wants to emphasize how much she sacrifices for her daughter's well-being. I nod and head upstairs to Mother's bedroom, the room that Chen Mei Ling claimed she was too emotionally overwhelmed to occupy. But I know the real reason she moved into the guest wing was because she couldn't find the key to Mother's private desk, the antique piece that Mother always kept locked and told me contained important papers for when you're older. The key is exactly where Mother said it would be, taped to the underside of her jewelry box behind her pearl earrings. And when I open the desk drawer, my hands start shaking because inside are legal documents, private letters, and a sealed envelope marked for Yu Xin, open only in case of emergency. Mother's letter is dated just 2 months before her death. And as I read her careful handwriting, I feel my world tilting on its axis because she writes, "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me and you are in danger. Because the woman your father plans to marry is not who she claims to be. And I have spent months investigating her background, only to discover that Chen Mei Ling is actually Chen Li Hua, the daughter of Chen Wei Ming, who lost everything when your grandfather's company destroyed his business in the 1980s. The letter continues with details that make my blood run cold. This woman has spent years planning revenge against our family, and I believe she orchestrated my cancer treatment delays by convincing your father to switch doctors to her specialist, who actually provided inadequate care. Though I cannot prove this suspicion, and I fear that if something happens to me, she will target you next, because you are the only thing standing between her daughter and complete control of the Lin family fortune." But the most devastating revelation comes in the final paragraph. I have placed half of all family assets in a private trust fund that only you can access when you turn 21, including controlling shares in Lin Construction that will legally belong to you regardless of what your father decides about his will, because I knew that if Chen Lihua succeeded in her plans, you would need resources to protect yourself and rebuild what she tries to destroy. The trust fund documents are all there, legally notarized and completely binding, proving that I've been the actual owner of half our family's wealth for months without knowing it. While Chen Mei Ling has been desperately searching for these papers so she could destroy the evidence of my inheritance before I discovered the truth. I'm sitting on Mother's bed holding proof that my stepmother is literally a revenge-seeking enemy who has spent 3 years systematically isolating me from Father and destroying my health through medical neglect. When I hear Chen Mei Ling's voice in the hallway talking on her phone in the dialect of her home province, the same accent she works so hard to hide when she's playing the refined second wife of a construction magnate. "Mother, everything is going according to plan," she says quietly. "The Lin girl is getting sicker and won't last much longer, especially with the medical delays I've been arranging. And once she's gone, Wei Wei will inherit everything, and our family will finally have revenge for what the Lin family did to Father all those years ago." My heart stops as I realize Chen Mei Ling doesn't know I'm home, that she thinks I'm still at the hospital, and she's speaking freely about her plan to let me die through medical neglect while positioning Wei Wei as Father's heir, the ultimate revenge for a business rivalry that happened before I was even born. The best part is that Lin Jianming has no idea what I'm doing. Stepmother continues with satisfaction in her voice. "He actually believes I'm protecting him from his daughter's medical expenses and dramatic behavior, and he's so grateful for my support for it that he's already started changing his will to favor Wei Wei, just like I planned from the beginning." I record this entire conversation on my phone, my hands trembling with rage and heartbreak, as I listen to this woman casually discuss my death as if it's just another step in her elaborate revenge scheme. And I realize that every missed medical appointment, every dismissal of my symptoms, every conflict that prioritized Wei Wei over my health has been carefully orchestrated to ensure that I die young and alone, while Father believes it's just unfortunate timing. The recording stops when Chen Mei Ling ends her call, and I hear her footsteps heading toward the stairs, probably planning to search Mother's room again for the documents she desperately needs to complete her plan, but this time I'm ready for her. When she enters Mother's bedroom and sees me sitting on the bed with the trust fund papers spread around me, her mask finally slips, and I see the cold calculation behind those sweet smiles she's been wearing for 3 years. "Those documents are forgeries," she says immediately, but her voice lacks conviction because we both know I've discovered the truth about who she really is and what she's been planning. "Chen Lihua," I say quietly, using her real name, and I watch her face go white as she realizes her cover is blown. "Daughter of Chen Wei Ming, the business rival who lost everything to my grandfather's company in 1987, and the woman who spent years planning elaborate revenge against my family by seducing my grieving father and systematically destroying his relationship with his only child." For a moment, neither of us speaks, and in that silence, I see her calculating whether she can still salvage her plan, whether she can convince Father that I'm lying or mentally unstable, whether she can still complete her mission of destroying the Lin family from within. "Your mother was weak," Chen Meiling finally says, dropping all pretense of maternal concern. "Just like you, always playing the victim instead of fighting for what belongs to you. And your father is too blinded by grief and guilt to see that you're exactly like her, selfish and demanding, and completely unable to appreciate everything he's given you." The cruelty in her voice is breathtaking, but what's worse is the realization that this is how she's really seen me for 3 years. Not as a grieving daughter who lost her mother too young, but as an obstacle to be removed through systematic psychological warfare and medical neglect. "You won't win," I tell her with more strength than I feel, "because I have evidence of everything you've done, and Father will never forgive you when he learns the truth about who you really are." But Chen Meiling just smiles with cold confidence and says, "Your father won't believe you, because I've spent 3 years convincing him that you're ungrateful and attention-seeking, and even if you show him these documents, I'll tell him you forged them in a desperate attempt to steal Wei Wei's inheritance. And he'll believe me because I'm the woman who brought light back into his life after your mother's death." That night, I try to call Father to tell him about my surgery timeline and beg him to come home so we can discuss Chen Meiling's true identity. But he's at some business dinner with stepmother and Wei Wei, celebrating her acceptance into a master's program that I happen to know she bought her way into through forged transcripts and bribed professors. Instead, I call Shu Ming Hao, my childhood neighbor whose family owns the competing construction company. The boy who used to climb over our garden wall to bring me books when I was sick, who has quietly loved me for years while I was too trapped in family drama to notice his steady presence and unwavering loyalty. You Shin? His voice is immediately alert with concern because I never call him this late unless something terrible has happened. What's wrong? Are you okay? Ming Hao, I whisper into the phone. I need help and I don't have anyone else to call. He's at my house within 20 minutes, climbing through my bedroom window the same way he did when we were children. And when I show him mother's documents and play Chen Mei Ling's recorded phone conversation, his face goes through a series of expressions that end in cold fury. That woman has been slowly killing you, he says quietly, and your father has been helping her do it. We stay up all night, planning how to expose Chen Mei Ling's true identity and protect my inheritance. But even as we're strategizing, I can feel my heart condition worsening from the stress and emotional trauma of discovering that my stepmother has literally been trying to murder me through medical neglect for 3 years. 2 weeks later, when I'm supposed to have my life-saving surgery, I collapse in the garden while father is at another one of Wei Wei's university events. And this time, there's no one home to call an ambulance except the housekeeper who finds me unconscious among mother's rose bushes. I die in the hospital emergency room at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, alone except for Ming Hao, who holds my hand and whispers that he loves me as the monitors flatline. And my last conscious thought is wondering whether father will even interrupt his business trip with Chen Mei Ling and Wei Wei to attend my funeral. Then I opened my eyes and realized I had been reborn. I'm 18 years old again, sitting in father's study 3 years ago on the exact day he announced he was remarrying Chen Mei Ling, the day I was too shocked and grief-stricken over mother's death to object properly, the day I welcomed a viper into our home because I thought having a stepmother and stepsister would heal our broken family. The déjà vu is overwhelming as I watch father pace nervously behind his mahogany desk, the same desk where mother used to help me with homework while he worked late into the evening. And I can see he's rehearsing the speech he's about to give me about moving forward as a family and giving love another chance. But this time, I know exactly what Chen Mei Ling is planning. I remember every manipulation tactic she'll use over the next 3 years, every medical appointment she'll sabotage, every moment she'll steal from me while positioning her daughter as father's new priority. And I realize I have been given the most precious gift imaginable, the chance to stop her before she destroys everything mother left for me. Yu Xin, father begins with that careful tone he uses when he's about to say something he knows will upset me. I know this past year has been difficult for both of us since your mother passed, and I've been thinking that perhaps it's time for us to consider expanding our family. In my previous life, this is the moment where I burst into tears and accused him of replacing mother, where I stormed out of the study and spent 3 days crying in my room before finally accepting that I had no choice but to welcome whatever woman had captured father's attention during his grief. But this time, I remain perfectly calm, sitting in the leather chair with my hands folded in my lap, watching father with the detached interest of someone who already knows how this story ends and is planning to rewrite every single chapter. You want to remarry? I say quietly, not making it a question because I remember every word of this conversation, and I know that Chen Mei Ling is waiting in the garden for father to call her inside once he's prepared me for the announcement. Her name is Chen Mei Ling, father continues, relief evident in his voice because he expected more resistance. And she has a daughter about your age named Wei Wei, and I hope that having other women in the house might help us both heal from losing your mother. The irony is staggering because the woman he thinks will help us heal is actually planning to ensure that I die young and alone while she and her daughter inherit everything mother worked to build. But I just nod and ask to meet this Chen Mei Ling because I want to look my future murderer in the eye while knowing exactly who she really is. When Chen Mei Ling enters the study with her sweet maternal smile and perfectly rehearsed concern for my emotional well-being, I study her face for traces of the calculation I remember, the cold ambition that she hid so well behind gentle words and selfless gestures. Yu Xin, she says softly, I know this must be overwhelming for you, and I want you to understand that I would never try to replace your mother or take away the special relationship you have with your father. The lies roll off her tongue so smoothly, exactly the same words she used 3 years ago. But this time I can see the predator behind the maternal facade, The woman who has spent years planning revenge against my family and views me as nothing more than an obstacle to be eliminated. I understand, I reply with a smile that matches her fake warmth. And I'm sure Wei Wei and I will become close friends, since we'll be living together as sisters. The flash of surprise in Chen Meiling's eyes tells me she expected more resistance, more tears and dramatic objections that would paint me as the selfish daughter who can't accept her father's happiness. But instead, I'm giving her exactly what she wants, while secretly planning to dismantle her revenge scheme piece by piece. That night, I sneak into Mother's bedroom and retrieve the trust fund documents from her locked desk, the same papers I discovered too late in my previous life. And this time, I immediately contact Mother's lawyer, Mr. Zhou Wei Ming, to activate my inheritance 3 years early. Miss Lin, Mr. Zhou says carefully when I call his private number, these documents were meant to be opened on your 21st birthday, and your mother was very specific about the timing. Mr. Zhou, I reply with steel in my voice. My father is about to marry a woman whose real name is Chen Li Hua, daughter of Chen Wei Ming, who lost his business to my grandfather in 1987, and she's planning to systematically destroy our family from within while letting me die of medical neglect. So I think we can agree this qualifies as the emergency situation Mother anticipated. The silence on the other end of the phone tells me that Mr. Zhou is processing this information and remembering things about Mother's final months that suddenly make sense in light of what I'm telling him. I'll need proof of these claims, he says, finally, because activating this trust fund early will legally emancipate you from your father's financial control and essentially declare war on your stepmother before she's even officially part of your family. Then let's declare war, I say quietly, because I refuse to spend the next 3 years dying slowly while that woman steals everything Mother left for me. The next morning, I wake up in my 18-year-old body with perfect memories of a 21-year-old's experiences. And the contrast is jarring because I remember being so much weaker, so much more desperate for Father's approval, so willing to sacrifice my own needs to maintain family harmony that I nearly let Chen Meiling murder me through systematic neglect. But this time, I'm not the naive girl who hands over her inheritance to pay for a stepsister's luxury lifestyle, who apologizes for existing, who begs for crumbs of paternal affection while her birthright is stolen from under her nose, because now I know exactly what Chen Meiling is planning, and I have 3 years to dismantle her revenge scheme while protecting everything Mother left for me. The first change Father notices is my behavior during Chen Meiling and Wei Wei's official introduction to our household staff, because instead of hiding in my room like I did in my previous life, I stand beside him as the young mistress of the house and greet our new family members with polite but distant courtesy. Yushin seems very mature for her age, Chen Meiling comments that evening, and I can hear the calculation in her voice as she tries to figure out why I'm not playing the role of the resistant teenager she was expecting. She's been through a lot this year, Father replies with the guilt he always carries when discussing how Mother's death affected me. But I think she's ready to move forward as a family. What Father doesn't know is that I'm already 3 steps ahead of Chen Meiling's manipulation timeline, because I remember exactly when she'll start suggesting that I'm too independent and need less attention than poor Wei Wei, who grew up without a father figure. I also remember that in 2 weeks, Chen Meiling will manufacture Wei Wei's first emergency that conflicts with my 18th birthday celebration, claiming that her daughter has developed sudden anxiety about starting university and needs immediate family support. But this time I'm ready for her. The first thing I do is visit Mr. Zhou Wei Ming with Mother's sealed letter and trust fund documents, because I know that Chen Meiling has been desperately searching for these papers so she can destroy them before I discover my inheritance. Mr. Zhou's office is exactly as I remember it, filled with legal tomes and family portraits, the sanctuary where Mother used to bring me when I was younger so I could understand the business side of our family's wealth. Miss Lin, Mr. Zhou says carefully as he examines Mother's letter and the trust fund documents, your mother was very specific that these were only to be opened in case of emergency, and she defined emergency as either her death or evidence that you were in immediate danger. Then this qualifies, I reply, sliding Chen Meiling's background investigation across his desk, because the woman my father married is Chen Li Hua, daughter of Chen Wei Ming, whose business was destroyed by my grandfather in 1987, and she's spent 3 years planning revenge against our family. Shh. Mr. Joe's expression grows increasingly grim as he reads through Mother's private investigation notes, the financial records showing Chen Mei Ling's real background, and the detailed timeline of how she systematically targeted Father during his most vulnerable period after Mother's death. Your mother suspected this, he says quietly, which is why she moved half of all family assets into this private trust fund that legally belongs to you regardless of what your father decides about his will or remarriage. The trust fund contains more wealth than I realized, controlling shares in Lin Construction Company, Mother's private real estate investments, her jewelry collection, and enough liquid assets to support me independently for the rest of my life. I want to activate this trust fund immediately, I tell Mr. Joe, and I want legal documentation that establishes my medical independence so that Chen Mei Ling cannot make healthcare decisions for me. Miss Lin, Mr. Zhou warns, activating this trust fund will essentially declare legal war on your stepmother and could permanently damage your relationship with your father. My father chose his new wife over his daughter's survival, I reply coldly, so our relationship was already damaged beyond repair. The legal paperwork takes 2 weeks to process, during which time I maintain my polite but distant relationship with Chen Mei Ling, while secretly documenting every manipulation tactic she attempts. She starts with small tests, like suggesting that I'm so mature and independent that I probably don't need Father to attend my university orientation. Or commenting that Wei Wei is still adjusting to having a father figure and needs extra attention during family events. In my previous life, I fell for these manipulations and actually volunteered to step back from family activities so that Wei Wei could have more bonding time with Father. But this time, I politely insist on Father's presence at every event while maintaining that I'm happy to include Wei Wei in family traditions. The frustration in Chen Mei Ling's eyes tells me she expected me to be more accommodating, more willing to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of family harmony. And she's recalculating her timeline because I'm not playing the role of the pushover stepdaughter she planned to manipulate. 2 weeks after activating my trust fund, I received the legal documents confirming my financial independence and medical autonomy, which means Chen Mei Ling can no longer control my healthcare decisions or access to medical treatment. That same day, exactly as I predicted, Chen Mei Ling approaches Father with tears in her eyes to report that Wei Wei has developed sudden severe anxiety about starting university and needs the family to rally around her during this difficult transition. Perhaps we should postpone Yu Xin's birthday celebration, she suggests with perfectly calculated concern, because loud parties and social events might trigger Wei Wei's anxiety, and we want her to feel safe and supported in her new home. In my previous life, Father immediately agreed to postpone my birthday party and spent the entire weekend focused on Wei Wei's manufactured crisis, while I celebrated alone in my room. But this time, I'm ready with my own counter-strategy. Actually, I say calmly when Father brings up stepmother's suggestion, I've already made other arrangements for my birthday celebration because I wanted to give Wei Wei time to adjust to our family without the pressure of participating in social events. The surprise on both their faces is worth savoring because they expected me to be hurt and disappointed by the suggestion that my birthday was less important than Wei Wei's anxiety. But instead, I'm demonstrating exactly the kind of mature independence that Chen Mei Ling claims to admire. What arrangements? Father asks, clearly confused by my unexpected response. I'm having dinner with the Xu family, I reply, since Ming Hao and I have been friends since childhood, and his parents have always treated me like a daughter. What I don't mention is that the Xu family owns the competing construction company, and having dinner with them on my birthday is a subtle signal that I'm building alliances outside of Father's influence. Chen Mei Ling's smile becomes strained as she realizes that her first manipulation attempt has backfired because instead of making me feel excluded and unimportant, she's actually pushed me toward independence and new relationships that could threaten her control over family dynamics. That evening, as I'm getting ready for dinner with the Xu family, Chen Mei Ling knocks on my bedroom door with that false maternal concern she wears when she's about to attempt psychological manipulation. Yu Xin, darling, she says softly, I hope you don't feel like we're pushing you away by focusing on Wei Wei's needs because your father and I just want everyone in this family to feel loved and supported. The gaslighting is exactly what I remember from my previous life. The way she would make me question my own perceptions, while positioning herself as the caring stepmother who only wants what's best for everyone. And I don't feel pushed away at all, I reply with sincere warmth, because I understand that Wei Wei needs extra attention right now, and I'm fortunate to have friends like the Shu family who can celebrate with me when our family is dealing with other priorities. Again, my response completely deflates her manipulation attempt because instead of expressing hurt or resentment, I'm gracefully accepting the situation while subtly highlighting how I'm building support systems outside of her control. At dinner with the Shu family, I'm struck by how different this feels from the emotional isolation I experienced in my previous life, because Mr. and Mrs. Shu treat me with genuine parental warmth, while Ming Hao quietly supports me without expecting anything in return. Yu Xin, Mrs. Shu says gently over dessert, we want you to know that you always have a place at our table, especially during this adjustment period with your father's new marriage. The kindness in her voice almost breaks my composure because it's been so long since an adult showed me unconditional maternal care. And I realized that in my previous life, I was so focused on winning father's approval that I never appreciated the genuine love that was available from other sources. Thank you, I whisper. That means more to me than you know. Ming Hao walks me home through our adjoining gardens, the same path we've taken countless times since childhood. And when we reach my bedroom window, he stops and looks at me with an expression I remember from my deathbed. Yu Xin, he says quietly, I know something is wrong with your family situation, and I want you to know that whatever happens, you're not alone. The sincerity in his voice reminds me that while Chen Mei Ling was systematically isolating me from father's affection, Ming Hao was consistently offering his friendship and loyalty without expecting anything in return, and I realized that true love was always available to me if I had been emotionally free enough to recognize it. Ming Hao, I say softly, what would you say if I told you that my stepmother isn't who she claims to be and that she's planning to destroy my family? His immediate response is everything I hoped for. I'd say that I've been waiting for you to trust me enough to ask for help. That night, I show Ming Hao all of Mother's documents and Chen Mei Ling's background investigation, and his reaction to learning about the generational revenge plot is a cold fury that reminds me why the Shu family has successfully competed with Lin Construction for decades. This woman has been slowly murdering you, he says quietly, and your father has been helping her do it. Not this time, I reply with steel in my voice, because now I know exactly what she's planning, and I have 3 years to destroy her before she can hurt anyone else. We spend the rest of the night planning Chen Mei Ling's downfall, starting with documenting her real identity and building a case for fraud that will destroy her social position and legal standing. The next phase of my strategy focuses on exposing Chen Mei Ling's lies to Shanghai's elite social circle because I remember exactly which wealthy wives she spent years impressing with fabricated stories about her background and family connections. I start with Mrs. Wang, Mother's closest friend who never quite accepted the new Mrs. Lin but tolerated her for father's sake. And when I visit her with proof of Chen Mei Ling's real identity, her reaction is everything I hoped for. I knew something was wrong, Mrs. Wang says grimly as she examines the background investigation documents. Because your mother mentioned having concerns about this woman's motivations, but none of us realize the depth of deception involved. Mrs. Wang agrees to quietly share this information with the other wives in Mother's social circle, and within 2 weeks, the Whisper campaign has destroyed Chen Mei Ling's carefully constructed reputation among Shanghai's elite families. The social destruction accelerates when I anonymously leak Chen Li Hua's real background to society gossip networks, complete with photos of her family's actual living conditions and documentation of her daughter's academic fraud. Wei Wei's acceptance into her master's program is revoked when universities discover her forged transcripts and bribed professors, and the resulting scandal makes headlines in education news because it exposes a larger corruption network involving wealthy families buying degrees for unqualified children. But the most devastating blow comes when I arrange for Chen Mei Ling's original family to be interviewed by investigative journalists about their daughter's elaborate revenge scheme against the Lin family because they're proud of her success and eager to share details about how she infiltrated Shanghai's elite society. The resulting newspaper article destroys any remaining credibility Chen Mei Ling had in high society because now everyone knows she's not a refined widow seeking companionship, but rather a calculating predator who spent years planning to destroy the family that welcomed her. Throughout this social warfare, I maintain my polite distance from stepmother and stepsister while building stronger relationships with families who supported mother during her lifetime, effectively creating a new power base that doesn't depend on father's approval or protection. The change in family dynamics becomes obvious when Chen Meiling realizes that her manipulation tactics no longer work on me, because every time she tries to position Wei Wei's needs above mine, I gracefully accept the situation while pursuing my own interests through other channels. When she suggests that Wei Wei needs father's support during her academic crisis, I agree and spend the weekend with the Xu family discussing potential business partnerships between our construction companies. When she claims that Wei Wei's emotional health requires family unity and understanding, I express complete support while privately meeting with lawyers to finalize my medical independence documentation. And the frustration in Chen Meiling's behavior becomes increasingly obvious as she realizes that her 3-year plan is falling apart because I'm no longer playing the role of the needy stepdaughter who can be controlled through emotional manipulation and medical neglect. 6 months after my rebirth, when I'm supposed to have my first heart episode, I instead have a private consultation with Dr. Wang using my own trust fund money, and the early intervention treatment prevents the cardiac damage that killed me in my previous life. The medical independence is perhaps the most important element of my revenge strategy because it ensures that Chen Mei Ling can never again delay my treatment or interfere with my healthcare decisions. Dr. Wang is initially surprised when I arrive for a consultation without family members. But when I explain my legal situation and show him documentation of my medical autonomy, he agrees to provide comprehensive cardiac care funded through my private insurance. Miss Lin, Dr. Wang says after reviewing my test results, your heart condition is manageable with proper medication and lifestyle adjustments, but it's crucial that you maintain regular monitoring and don't delay treatment if symptoms worsen. That won't be a problem, I reply, because I now have complete control over my medical decisions and the financial resources to ensure I receive the best possible care. The contrast with my previous life is staggering because instead of declining health and delayed treatment that led to my death at 21, I now have access to early intervention and preventive care that will allow me to live a normal lifespan. Meanwhile, Chen Meiling's social position continues to deteriorate as more details about her deception emerge through the elite gossip network, and she finds herself increasingly isolated from the wealthy wives she spent years cultivating. The final phase of her social destruction occurs at the annual Lin Construction Charity Gala, the same event where she originally planned to solidify her position as the respectable second Mrs. Lin. But this year, instead of being welcomed as father's elegant new wife, she faces a room full of people who know exactly who she really is and why she targeted our family. Mrs. Wang approaches Chen Meiling with icy politeness and says loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "Miss Chen Lihua, how interesting to see you here, given your family's unfortunate history with the Lin Construction Company." The use of Chen Meiling's real name in such a public setting creates an immediate buzz of conversation, as other guests realize they're witnessing the exposure of a social fraud. And I watch from across the room as stepmother's carefully constructed persona crumbles in real time. Father, who has been kept in the dark about his wife's true identity, looks confused and embarrassed as whispered conversations swirl around them. And for the first time since his remarriage, I see him questioning whether he really knows the woman he married. The coup de grace comes when investigative journalists arrive at the gala with cameras and microphones, asking Chen Meiling to comment on the accusations that she deliberately infiltrated the Lin family as part of a generational revenge scheme. "Mrs. Lin," one reporter calls out, "can you confirm that your real name is Chen Li Hua and that your father, Chen Wei Ming, lost his business to Lin Construction in 1987? The public confrontation forces Chen Meiling to either maintain her lies in front of cameras or admit to years of deception, and either choice destroys her credibility and social standing. She chooses to flee the gala with Wei Wei, leaving father standing alone among guests who are now questioning his judgment and wondering what other secrets his wife has been hiding. That night, father comes to my room looking older and more defeated than I've ever seen him. And for the first time in years, he asks me to explain what's been happening in our family. "You Xin," he says quietly, "I'm starting to realize that I haven't been paying attention to things I should have noticed, and I need you to help me understand what's been going on with Chen Mei Ling." This is the conversation I've been planning for 6 months. The moment when I can finally tell father the truth about his wife's identity and motivations without sounding like a jealous daughter making accusations. I show him mother's investigation documents, the trust fund papers that prove my inheritance, and the recorded phone conversation where Chen Mei Ling discusses her revenge plan with her real mother. Father's reaction is everything I hoped for: shock, guilt, rage, and finally a clear understanding of how thoroughly he's been manipulated for 3 years. She used my grief against me, he says quietly, and I was so desperate to fill the hole your mother left that I never questioned her motivations or background. Father, I replied gently, Mother suspected Chen Mei Ling's true identity before she died, which is why she moved half our assets into a trust fund that only I could access. The revelation that Mother tried to protect me even after death brings tears to Father's eyes, and for the first time since his remarriage, I see genuine remorse for how his choices affected my well-being. I failed you, he admits, and I failed your mother's memory by bringing that woman into our home. You were grieving, I say with more compassion than I feel. And Chen Mei Ling spent years planning how to exploit that grief for her own purposes. Father's legal team spends the next month untangling the mess Chen Mei Ling created with forged documents and fraudulent financial transfers, and the investigation reveals the full scope of her deception. She had been systematically stealing from family accounts to fund Wei Wei's lifestyle while planning to claim that I was mentally unstable and couldn't manage my inheritance, setting up a scenario where she could gain legal control of all family assets after my planned death. The criminal fraud charges against Chen Mei Ling and Wei Wei make headlines in Shanghai business news, exposing their elaborate con game and destroying any remaining credibility they had in elite social circles. Wei Wei faces additional charges for academic fraud and identity theft, while Chen Mei Ling confronts prosecution for elder fraud, financial manipulation, and conspiracy to commit inheritance theft. But perhaps the most satisfying element of their downfall is how completely they've been ostracized by the society they worked so hard to infiltrate, because everyone now knows they were frauds from the beginning. Through all of this legal drama, Ming Hao remains my constant support, visiting every day to check on my well-being and offering practical help with legal proceedings and business decisions. Yu Xin, he says one evening as we walk through Mother's garden, I want you to know that watching you reclaim your life and fight for your family's honor has been the most inspiring thing I've ever witnessed. The admiration in his voice reminds me that while I was fighting for survival and justice, I was also demonstrating exactly the kind of strength and intelligence that makes someone worthy of genuine love. Ming Hao, I reply softly, I couldn't have done any of this without your support and friendship. It was never just friendship for me, he admits quietly. But I was waiting for you to be emotionally free enough to consider something more. This is the moment I've been anticipating since my rebirth, because I remember how much I regretted not recognizing Ming Hao's love before it was too late. And this time, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm free now, I tell him with a smile that feels like the first genuine happiness I've experienced in years. And I'm ready to build something real with someone who chose me consistently instead of conditionally. Our first kiss happens in Mother's rose garden, surrounded by the flowers she planted when I was a child. And I feel her blessing on this relationship that represents everything Chen Mei Ling tried to destroy: genuine love, family loyalty, and the triumph of truth over manipulation. 6 months later, as I stand in the garden of the home Mother left me, watching Father's legal team finalize the last documents related to Chen Mei Ling's fraud prosecution, I feel nothing but pity for the man who chose a revenge fantasy over his own daughter's life. Because the greatest punishment for someone who craved my family's acceptance is to be completely and utterly irrelevant to my happiness. Chen Mei Ling and Wei Wei are serving concurrent sentences for fraud and conspiracy, their reputations destroyed beyond repair in the social circles they worked so hard to infiltrate, and their original revenge plan has backfired so spectacularly that the Chen family is worse off than they were before this elaborate scheme began. Father spends his days trying to rebuild the business relationships that Chen Mei Ling damaged and attempting to repair the family reputation she destroyed. But the cost of her deception extends far beyond financial losses, because now everyone in Shanghai's business community knows that Lin Jianming was completely manipulated by a woman seeking revenge against his family. Yu Xin, father says when he comes to visit me in mother's house, the property that legally belongs to me through the trust fund. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I hope someday you might be willing to rebuild our relationship. I look at this man who was once my hero, who taught me about business and integrity and family loyalty, and I see someone who has finally learned the cost of choosing convenience over love, manipulation over truth. Father, I reply gently, I forgive you for being human and making mistakes, but our relationship will never be what it was before you chose Chen Mei Ling over me. The sadness in his eyes tells me he understands that some damage cannot be repaired, that trust broken so thoroughly requires more than apologies to rebuild, and that I have moved beyond needing his approval or protection. I'm proud of how strong you've become, he says quietly, and your mother would be proud too. Mother is the reason I survived, I tell him, because she gave me the tools to protect myself when you couldn't protect me. My construction company, built with Mother's inheritance and Ming Hao's business partnership, has become one of Shanghai's most respected firms in just 6 months, proving that the Lin family talent for construction and business development was never dependent on father's guidance or approval. Ming Hao and I work together as equal partners, combining our family's expertise and resources to create something bigger than either company could achieve alone. And our engagement announcement makes headlines in business news as the merger of two construction dynasties. Our wedding is held in Mother's garden on a perfect spring day, surrounded by the people who chose to love and support me consistently instead of conditionally. And as I walk down the aisle in Mother's wedding dress, I feel her presence blessing this union that represents everything she hoped for my future. Dr. Wang reports that my heart condition is completely stable with proper medication and regular monitoring, and my prognosis for a normal lifespan is excellent now that I have access to quality health care and emotional support. Mrs. Xu, he says with a smile during my latest checkup, your heart is strong, and with continued care, you should live to see your grandchildren. The promise of a future I almost lost brings tears to my eyes because in my previous life, I died at 21 believing I was unloved and unwanted, but now I have decades ahead of me filled with genuine love, meaningful work, and the family I'll build with Ming Hao. 3 months after our wedding, I discover I'm pregnant with our first child, and as I place my hand on my still flat stomach, I think about the Lin family name, continuing through a child who will be raised with love and protection instead of manipulation and neglect. This baby will know its grandmother through the stories we tell, I whisper to Ming Hao as we sit in Mother's garden watching the sunset, and it will grow up understanding that family means choosing to love someone consistently, not just sharing blood. The irony isn't lost on me that Chen Mei Ling's elaborate revenge scheme ultimately failed because she underestimated the power of genuine love and the strength that comes from being consistently chosen by people who value you for who you are, rather than what you can provide. She spent years planning to destroy the Lin family legacy, but instead she catalyzed my transformation from a naive girl desperate for approval into a strong woman who built her own empire and chose her own family based on love rather than obligation. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been reborn with knowledge of her plans, if I had continued down the path of medical neglect and emotional manipulation that led to my death at 21. And I realized that the greatest gift of my rebirth wasn't the chance for revenge, but the opportunity to choose love over fear, strength over victimhood, and truth over the comfortable lies that nearly killed me. As I watch my husband tend to Mother's roses while planning the nursery for our coming child, I know that this is the life Mother dreamed for me when she created the trust fund that saved my future. And the happiness I've built is the greatest revenge against anyone who ever tried to convince me I was unworthy of genuine love. The Lin family legacy continues, not through the manipulation and control that Chen Mei Ling craved, but through the conscious choice to build something beautiful with someone who chose me consistently. And our children will inherit not just wealth and business success, but the knowledge that they are loved unconditionally and protected absolutely. This is my rebirth story, not just the return to life, but the journey from victim to victor, from isolation to love, from desperation to peace. and the understanding that sometimes we must lose everything to discover what truly matters in this world.